Welcome back to another episode of the Field of 68 Off-Season Grades. My name is Rob Dawson. I am joined today by John Fanta, and we are going to be diving into yes, I said my UConn Huskies. Fanta, the way that this roster has kind of played out this offseason actually works out pretty well for UConn. They bring back Solo Ball. They bring back Alex Caravan. They bring back Terrace Reed. They bring back Jalen Stewart, and they bring back Jaden Ross. More or less, five of their top eight from last season gone. Liam McNeely was a first round pick. Aiden Mahaney transferred out. Ahmad Noel transferred out. Isaiah Abraham transferred out. They lost Samson Johnson and Hassan Diarra to graduation, and they've added Silas Demery, who was the big transfer pickup in the offseason from Georgia, Malachi Smith from Dayton, as well as a pair of very highly regarded freshmen, Braylon Mullins and Eric Reba, and a young man by the name of Jacob Furphy from Australia, who looks like someone that may actually be contributing more than we thought when he committed during the season last year. So let's start with this. What do you make of this team? What do you make of this roster? What do you make of this group that Dan Hurley has put together for this season?
Well, Rob, I think that this is a team that has the makeup to reach the program's third Final Four in 4 years and frankly can win a national championship. Because when you have the continuity factors, you also have the hunger factor of last year. Look how close they came. They came as close as anybody, just about anybody, to taking down Florida, and Florida had a couple of real dramatic wins, but UConn was giving Florida's defense so many fits, and the Gators they were in a deep hole. Florida, they would tell you, they might not win a national championship without that test from UConn to make them have a reality check. The Huskies are loaded. They're absolutely stacked. And now, Jalen Stewart, Solo Ball, they have had so many experiences, both good and bad. Mostly good, but some rough ones, where you're better off from that. You've seen it all. You're unfazed by all this. I think for me, when you bring in Silas Demery and you bring in Malachi Smith, but Demery to me is this scoring guard who's tough and brings that SEC pedigree, obviously was in so many different big-time games this past year and, was part of a trip to the tournament. He is a really dynamic player who's going to make others better because of the amount of defensive attention that he attracts. That kid's a stud. So the point is they've got the pieces here, and not to mention the freshman class. Braylon Mullins, UConn beat reporter, said after going to practice last week that Braylon Mullins is going to be somebody who, one, plays a part this season. We don't know how big, but could be a star. I could really be that type of player, and the UConn staff is obviously bullish on him. I think what you think of UConn is dependent on what you think of their front court. And Terrace Reed, his development at the end of last season, what he ended up becoming, and what happens beyond him. But there's no shortage of shooting. Alex Caravan is back, and he is Mr. Season, Mr. Done It All, Mr. National Champion, Mr. UConn. He is Mr. Connecticut. He's the poster boy of the Dan Hurley era in terms of a guy who's been around the block, has seen it all. The Huskies have what it takes to get to Indianapolis. There is no doubting that. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
I think that they've put together the perfect kind of roster construction. And what I mean by that, Fana, is I think that too much gets put on what you bring in from the transfer portal, the way that we overvalued 4, 5, 6 years ago, what you brought in from a freshman recruiting class, right? I think that being able to have a level of continuity within your program is more important than just about anything else. Look at the teams that made the national title game, or that made the Final Four last year, the 4 best teams in the country. 3 of them in Florida, Houston, and Auburn were basically built on players that were coming back and player development within the program. I think what UConn did this year is they got 5 key rotation pieces back, specifically Solo Ball, Terrace Reed and Alex Carabin are three guys that I think are going to be in the conversation for all Big East this year. I think Terrace Reed has a chance to, be one of the breakout stars in college basketball, point blank, period. I think that Alex Carabin, in a situation where he will be the fourth guy on the scouting report, is going to get back to being one of the best players in the Big East, right? Solo Ball is going to have a huge year. So I think that building a team where you have a couple of a transfer filling a hole, freshmen coming into play roles, but the core of what you're doing, the crux of what you're doing, are guys that are coming back for their second, third, sometimes fourth years in the program, is why, to me, UConn is in the conversation as a top 10 team. I have them as the number 4 team in the country in the preseason because they went out and they added the one piece that they were missing, and that was a big lead guard that could handle the point guard role, that could handle the Tristan Newton role, that could be the guy that. So UConn fans will have heard me say this, but basically what UConn wants to do offensively is they run a whole bunch of stuff. They run all these different actions, all this false motion, trying to create a shot out of a set that they run, right? It normally takes 20, 22 seconds out of the shot clock to do that. And then if it doesn't work and you're at the end of a clock, you need a guy that you can give it to and just say, all right, put him in a ball screen, put him in an ISO, go make something happen. Tristan Newton was an All-American when he played that role because he could get to the basket, draw fouls, make threes, create for others. And I think Silas Demery is the guy that can do that again. They thought it was going to be Aiden Mahaney last year when they were building their roster. And then they got him on campus and they realized that he was not going to be at the level that they expected. It kind of forced Hassan Diarra into a role that maybe wasn't ideal for him. And it really limited what they were last season. And I think that changes this year with Silas Demery. I think that he is the most important addition. I would make the argument of all the transfers that committed this year, he is as good of a fit for what UConn needs as anybody else in college basketball when it comes to pieces that were added. So I am very, very high on where this program is because they plugged the holes that they had last year and they were able to build through what they were already bringing back.
Well, they have the makeup of a top 5 or so team in the country. And, what's interesting is their kids have stuck around to the degree that they have. And that's a really big thing in college basketball that needs to get talked about more. I mean, now let's face it. When you look at a Jaden Ross or a Jalen Stewart, those guys could be elsewhere. They really could be. And because it's normal for other guys that were at their level to say, you know what, I'm going to try this or I'm going to try that. That's not UConn. And it's just not their program. And why wouldn't you want to be challenged? Why wouldn't you want to toughen up? Here's the deal. Connecticut was top 10 in the country in KenPom defense in 2022-23, 23-24. Last year, they were 75th. By the end of the season, they were not playing like the 75th best defensive team. But in November, they were playing like the 150th best defensive team. In December, they figured some stuff out. The Big East was forgiving in the middle. They were just better than a lot of teams in that league from a talent perspective and a coaching perspective, and they won. As a result, they didn't win to the same degree that they have been, but it's hard to do that a third consecutive year. Let's be honest, too. But when you take your lumps, when you go through some tough times, and your kids stick around, evidence would support that then kids get better off that, they get tougher off that, and they emerge into different roles. But you are right. UConn has been big man, but they have been guard you. Where a guard can step into that program, and there's an aura about playing there, and there's a toughness factor that you garner as a result of getting challenged. And either you know how to handle it or you don't. Aiden Mahaney and Dan Hurley were not a match. Silas Demery and Dan Hurley come off as a match. Silas Demery is a guy that you said can go get his, and they did not have enough break you down guard play last year when in college basketball, you've got to have it. Walter Clayton had that, and his team won a championship. You look at Houston, they had broken possessions. They figured out a way to get there. And Duke, at the end of the day, Cooper Flag could go get a bucket. So, to me, this team addressed their key area of need there. The question is with Reed, because Rob, if you looked at Terrace Reed, at the end of in general on the season, he averaged 10 and 7 per game. So, he was not this 16 and 10 guy. Now, he's on the same team as Samson Johnson, and it took time. You said Tristan Newton was an All-American. Remember, UConn fans, Tristan Newton became that. He didn't have it all figured out in November and December of his first season with the program. He emerged into that. So if you panic on November 20th or whatever, remember, Connecticut, they scheduled. They put BYU on the schedule. They put Illinois. They put Arizona. They put Texas.
It's no joke, man.
They're playing
It's
top
no
20
joke.
teams aplenty. That will help them. They're in the Jimmy V, right, against Florida. I mean, that schedule is a gauntlet of games. It's going to make them better, and give it a little bit of time. You're not going to have everything figured out on November 15th, but when you've got the continuity that you do, you're going to have a lot figured out.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Yeah, so you mentioned this earlier, right? The X factor for me for this group is the defensive end of the floor. They got much better at the end of last season than they were at the start of last season. It was, for a while, a mess on that end. I think that they will improve not having Samson Johnson out there. I love Samson. Was a liability on the glass and was not the best on-ball defender or the best pick and roll defender that we've ever seen. I think that that being able to allow Terrace Reed to play more minutes will help them on that end of the floor, but it's still a red flag to me. I would make the argument that Hassan Diarra was their best on-ball defender last year, and he's gone. Solo Ball is not exactly someone that screamed defensive stopper last season. And as good as I think Braylon Mullins has a chance to be, if you are a freshman and you're coming in to the Big East, like, you're not supposed to be a good defender as a freshman. Like, Steph Castle is the exception that proves the rule that freshmen are not built to be great defenders in college basketball. So that's my big question, man. Like, what will this team be defensively? Because I think if you're a top 50-ish kind of a defense on KenPom, you can make a Final Four. You're probably not winning a national championship if you're that. If they're a top 20 defense on KenPom, that's a very different conversation to be having.
Yeah, I think that there would be two X factors for me. And the first one might actually catch some people by surprise. But allow me to explain. One would be Alex Caravan. And your response is, how could you say that, John? Because of how last year went at times. Because when you go from third or fourth wheel to top wheel, top of scouting report, sometimes that takes a transition period. We both know that Alex at his best, if he is knocking down shots, and it's not an if, when he is locked in and engaged, which he always is, when he's not overthinking. Alex is an incredibly smart kid. He's very intelligent.
He's too smart for his own good. Like, he thinks too much. There's an element of, and we saw it last year after the Villanova thing, when he missed the 2 free throws when they were down by 1 at Villanova, and you just saw his confidence plummet, right? And it was one of those things where when he was wide open in a wide open catch and shoot situation, and he had an opportunity to think about what was about to happen, he was a mess. But when it was just like natural reaction, when it was like, I'm going to go get a tip in, when it's like, you got to go drive and spin and make this little floater where you're just playing, you're not able to think about it, that's when he actually had success down the stretch last year. Like, he might be too smart for his own good, which is,
But you know what? You mature off that.
Yes.
And I expect him to, and he's been through it all. There's nothing that's going to phase that kid. He's one of the hardest working players I've ever covered. And I'm intrigued to see now what he does as a senior and how it all pans out. The other thing would be, And I did ask a UConn official this morning to make sure. Eric Ryba, RYE, like rye bread. But what Ryba brings, like he is 7 feet tall, and there's got to be a place for that. I would have to think at some point in a game or two, and maybe it just totally backfires, doesn't work out year one. It's okay. He's a freshman. I'm not sitting here saying, and Braylon Mullins. I just think what those two guys bring. You brought up the point of freshman and Stephon Castle being the exception. I totally agree with that. But when you're on a veteran-laden team, being a freshman becomes easier.
Yes.
And when you're 7 feet tall, it's hard not to think you can't have some sort of a role at some point, because when Terrace Reed's not in the game and they need some size, they're going to have to. You would like to think that they're looking at a top 40 kid and saying, yeah, we're going to groom Eric Ryba and he's going to get some time. And, we're willing to put up with some of the mistakes early on, but it is what it is. Like, their plan is for him to be a very talented player. Braylon Mullins,
He
all the
needs to
reviews
be.
have been very good. So that's exactly it. He needs to be. So then that to me makes that duo a big X factor to this team's ceiling. Because Rob, what happens if they're both good and by March become, wow, they're really good. They're really a part of this. If that happens, then we're not talking about top 5 team. We could be talking about top 1 team.
Yes, I do believe that that's within the range of outcomes of their season, and you're 100% correct on it. The benefit that they have, especially for Braylon, is he is going to be asked to come in and just do a job. Like you don't have to carry much of the load. Like 90% of what they run offensively is going to be stuff for solo ball, right? Find ways to be able to get solo ball sprinting into a screen. And Braylon's going to be able to kind of be like, look, he'll be the third or fourth option offensively, maybe even the fifth option offensively. And when you have a guy that is good enough to be a top 10, 15 kind of recruit, a guy that is showing up on some draft boards, right? He's 6'5", one of the best shooters you're going to find. He's got some pop to him. He's got some toughness to him. He's going to dunk on some people this year. It's going to surprise someone. Um, it's going to make life very easy for him because there's going to be no expectation and there's going to be no he's not going to be the top of the scouting report, so to speak, right? Just coming to do a job. Same thing with Ryba. I will say this about Ryba, that what made Donovan Clingan so effective as a freshman and as a lower rated freshman than Ryba was coming in is that it was literally come in, Adama Sanogo is the horse. All you have to do is come in here for 12 to 14 minutes a game, play as hard as you can. Don't give a shit about fouling, right? Because we don't need you to stay out of foul trouble. And go in there, block some shots, get some rebounds, and just be an absolute force playing balls to the wall for your 3 to 4 minute stretches, right? That's all you got to do. And if Ryba can embrace being that guy, then I think that he's going to have a very real impact on winning for them. What are your expectations for this group, right? Because it's hard. If you look at the last 3 years for UConn, they weren't a preseason top 25 team when they won it in 23. They were kind of in that 10 to 12 range when they won it in 24. No one thought heading into the season that UConn was going to be the best team in college basketball.
They weren't ranked in the preseason poll 23-24.
Yeah, they were no, they were like a top 20, top 15, 20 kind of a team, right? The first year that they won it, they weren't ranked. The second year that they
I'm
won
saying
it,
the first year they won it, they were not in the preseason rank.
yeah, they weren't ranked. The second year that they won it, they were like a top 10, 12, 14 kind of a team. And then they turned out to be the best team in college basketball. And then last year, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, they're top 3, right? This is good. Just trust Dan Hurley." And it did not work. So they're heading into this year, and the expectations for me are probably preseason top 5. I think consensus will have them preseason top 10. So just how good do you think they can be? Is this a team that can go out and win a national title this year, Fanta?
Yes, absolutely they can. Absolutely they can if they become better defensively, if their front court can find a nice mesh between Terrace Reed and Eric Ryba, if Silas Demery can become that dude, but he doesn't have to be that dude every night because they've got solo ball and they've got Jalen Stewart. And they brought in Malachi Smith, who was injured. And, Dan Hurley said last week, we need him to ramp up in the winter. We need that kid in the winter. And look, another complimentary piece. Alex Caravan will the All-American candidate and Alex Caravan get unleashed from him. They can do it. They're going to be battle tested as anybody. I want to commend Dan Hurley on scheduling. It's better for college basketball with UConn and marquee games. Having BYU in Boston, so smart. Like, what a great destination game. And, for fans, for NBA evaluators to have that at TD Garden with AJ DeBonsa in town. How about Illinois on Black Friday? How about Texas at Gamble? Place is going to be off the walls. Arizona also on your schedule. So, I just look at it from a standpoint of, and Florida and the Jimmy V, they schedule, they're really, they pride themselves on challenging themselves. The race to the top of the Big East is going to be super, super intriguing. I'm so fascinated to see that. Texas will be in Hartford. Arizona will be in Stores. I think that this team can do it. I think that they got to be pissed off with the way last year ended. And why not? Why not UConn at the top of the country again? Because they've shown with this type of roster, especially if they get a little tandem going at the 5-man position, they also are going to have the ability, Rob, to play small if they would like to. I'm just saying from a spacing perspective, this should be an elite spacing offensive shot making team. They should be right at the top of the country in those types of columns.
I will say elite spacing is probably putting it mildly, right? Demery shot 37% from the floor. Solo ball was arguably the best shooter in college basketball last year, and Braylon Mullins might be a better shooter than Solo ball is. Alex Caravan's going to shoot 40% on catch and shoot threes from the corner. Jalen Stewart shot 36%. Malachi Smith shot 38%. Jaden Ross, we'll see. Hopefully becomes a shooter. Jacob Furphy can, they are going to have so many threes go up this year. So many of them.
Yeah, they're going to be a really fun team to watch. They're going to be extremely dangerous in transition. And they're going to get, when they're in Gamble and they're running the floor, that place is just going to be on fire because that's how those fans get. It's all about how you limit teams offensively. How do you guard? 100%. How do you get up in people? How do you UConn last year, at the very end of last year, I thought they got a little bit. They didn't have that full-on nasty. When they're that damn good, Rob, they've got a nasty to them that instills fear in you. This team should have the makeup to make that happen. And you know why? A big reason why is they've got returnees who are pissed off and know what the standard is. And that's real. In this sport, a lot of programs are losing their standard. Because the off season is churn, portal, assemble team, let's play. You're wearing these jerseys. At Connecticut, that's not how they do business. That's not how Dan Hurley works his program. The moment that it doesn't work like that for him, he's not going to want to be there. He will always be that way, UConn. It always has been that way since Jim Calhoun, who is at the very worst, a top 10 coach in the last 25 years. I had to get that in there. And so is Dan Hurley when you repeat for national championships. Look, the Huskies have what it takes to get there, provided that they increase their defensive intensity and find a backbone on that end of the floor. It's all there for the taking.
Yep, I agree. Grade for the offseason, I went with an A. I would have given it an A+ if I felt a little bit better about the depth in the front court and a little bit better about what they are defensively. But it's very hard to argue with an A when I have them as a preseason top 5 team. So where are you at with it?
A. I'm going with an A as well, because the only reason why it's not an A+ is the reason you just stated. They're relying on a freshman, to be that backup big man. And the starting big man, I think, has what it takes to be that type of a guy. Now we just have to see it. But it's an A. Straight A's for UConn in this offseason.
There you heard it from John Fanta himself. Make sure you tune in to the Field of 68. We'll be rolling out about 45 of these off-season grades throughout August and September. So make sure you're locked in. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you on the next episode. Field of 68 off-season grades.